I would like to introduce Dr. Richard Goldberg. Dr. Goldberg, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Where did you go to school to become a therapist and a psychologist or a psychiatrist?
Well, really, the most important part of my education was in London, England, many years ago in the mid-60s, when I was very privileged to work with the now well-known Dr. R.D. Laing, who was a British psychoanalyst who in the mid-60s had started an experimental community where people who would otherwise have to be committed to mental hospital could instead live with their madness in a protected setting without the use of any medications, on the basis, and the belief was then that that madness, or what we call psychosis, was actually a natural healing process, that if it was left alone pretty much and with the support of others, the person could get through it without any untoward effects from medications or other physical therapies that were prevalent at the time. Remember, this was the mid-60s.
Can you tell us a little bit about where the theory came from? Is it closer related to Freudian or to any other type of psychoanalysis?
Well, the closest description of what Laing did, I think, would go by the term existential psychoanalysis. Laing and his colleagues were steeped in existential philosophy. So much so that actually one of Laing's early books, called Reason and Violence, actually had an introduction by Sartre himself. So that continued to be a very important influence in Laing's thinking. The emphasis was really on the experience of the person more than anything else.
Now, were those people that were treated in that way, were they hospitalized for any period of time?
Yes, that's a good question. Most of the people that ended up at Kingsley Hall, which it was called, which was this first therapeutic community in East London, were people that had had many years of conventional hospital psychiatric treatment to no avail. They continued to not do very well, and seeing Laing, they decided that they would take a chance and maybe try something different. And for many of them, but perhaps not all of them, it seemed to be very helpful.
Can you give us what the diagnosis would be in modern terms of what those people were suffering from at that time?
Yeah, I would say the majority of those people were diagnosed schizophrenic. Probably a lesser number would be what we would call today bipolar disorder, or manic depressive disorder, and related disorders. They were people with significant mental health histories.
And are there any statistics available of relapse of the condition?
Well, you know, it was only later in the United States that a psychiatrist by the name of Loren Mosher, who was then head of the Schizophrenia Studies Division of NIMH, he helped found two similar households in Northern California. One was called Emanon House, which is no name spelled backwards, and the other was Sotiria House, based in San Jose. And he did, with his colleagues, very interesting follow-up studies, which, for the most part, to sum it up, showed that this approach is helpful, particularly with younger people. They actually did a control group, and they had patients coming either to the Sotiria household, which was like the London-based community of years previous, or people had traditional mental health treatment, and those people, that was the control group, and those two groups were evaluated over a period of time, and the ones that actually had the Sotiria experience seemed to do much better in the long run.
And what has happened to that type of therapy?
Well, I think in some ways it's been usurped by mainstream psychiatry. Not all of it, but some of the ideas. Certainly the whole notion of therapeutic community, halfway house, I think owed something to this early approach. Let's see. although given the state of biological psychiatry in the mid-60s, it was fairly primitive compared to what we have today. Medications, as you may know, for the most part, were very had terrible side effects, things like Largactil, or I guess that's Thorazine in this country, and stuff like that. So that I have a different view now, a much more, I think, balanced view of the role of biological psychiatry versus the more radical Langian approach, if you want.
The way that psychiatry is going, where you rarely miss a day when there is not some type of interaction between somebody that has a so-called mental illness, what do you see the future for treatment of people to prevent some of the possible negligent effects that can come from these people?
One of the things that's happening right now in the Bay Area and in some other places in the United States is that they've devised these early intervention programs where you can catch young people either in late adolescence or early adulthood and catch them in what's called the prodromal stage of their illness. And if you can do that, you have a very good chance of nipping this thing in the bud.
Do you have any suggestions how this could be done, how this type of screening could be done?
Well, you need the resources, you need the money to do it. These programs are very expensive, they're very labor intensive. You have to find the right people to do this kind of work. But it's happening. It's happening on a small scale, and I hope that this will continue.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.